in the fact that the quilting is generally kind of relegated to the category of women's crafts and not necessarily a fine art. And so I was also kind of looking at how to, I don't know about elevate, but incorporate quilting elements into something that was more fine arty, or something that you would hang on the wall and maybe consider fine art. So this quilt and some other ones were in my Fleisher Wind Challenge show that some of you may have seen. And that was really an important turning point for me as an artist, because it gave me some recognition and it gave me some more confidence. And once I was done with some of my quilting work, I started working on portraits of my husband, which I'm going to move to over here.
So, Debbie, do you want to turn the camera now horizontally so we can see more? Or
what do you want me to do, Gerard?
Horizontally.
Say that again?
Just to turn your phone so we can see more of your studio.
Oh, sure. You want me to just show the whole thing for a second?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. So, okay.
Ooh, nice.
That's what we were just looking at.
Hey, Debbie, we were saying if you can turn your phone horizontally, we'll see more of the space. It'll fill the screen. There you go.
There we go.
So that's half of the studio. The other half, I share my studio for cost sharing reasons with a really wonderful artist named Laura Cantu Hertzler, and she's also a teacher at Fleischer. She teaches 2 classes, color for artists and painting class, and she's really awesome. And it's been really, really great to share a studio with a painter, because as a photographer, I haven't done a lot of the stuff like color studies, and so I took a class with Laura where we made these color wheels and talked about, and I'll talk later about the influence of painting and how I'm trying to incorporate painting in my work as well. But so our studio is divided into 2. This is Laura's half right here, and this is my half right here.
Do you also work out of your home?
So I used to have just a studio at home, but now that I have my studio here, I work mostly here. I like to get out of the house.
Of course.
But as far as setting up for photo shoots, I still have that at home because I don't really have a lot of room here to set up for a photo shoot. So I'm going to keep going with the tour of the work. After the quilts, I started making portraits of my husband. And the reason that I started doing that is that I was trying to find images of naked men and women to put on a quilt. I had a concept for a quilt, but I couldn't find a lot of pictures of naked men. I could only find pictures of naked women when I was looking at famous photographers' work. So I noticed that a lot of famous male photographers took lots of pictures of their female partners, and so did lots of female photographers took a lot of pictures of their female partners, but not a lot of female photographers took pictures of their male partners. So my wonderful husband agreed to be my model. And to help, it's okay. And to help me. And so we put together a wall of mirrors. So all of these things that you see are not collages. I know they look like collages because they have lots of little pieces, but they're actually single photographs that are taken of a reflect, and it would be reflected in a wall of broken mirrors. And I have a mirror here to show you how it works. You can actually see me reflected. You see how I'm reflected, but it's all broken up because there are pieces on the mirror that break up the image. So we made a whole wall of mirrors like that. And then we took pictures, and you see when I move around, the image changes. So that's how we made those images.
So you kept changing the background in order to do that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so the background here was a white wall with colored squares on it that got all broken up. The background here was actually a giant print made by another wonderful artist called Laureen. And she let me use her giant image as a background. It's like an image of a room.
Wow.
Then.
And were you also changing the mirrors as well?
We changed the position in vis-a-vis the mirrors, not necessarily the mirrors themselves, because every time you move in front of the mirrors, it changes it changes what you see. But we didn't change the wall of mirrors much because it's really hard to make.
Right.
So after those, I started getting interested in printing on various different materials. So I started printing on glass and on mirrors. So instead of using the broken mirrors here, I actually printed on a mirror. This is an image that I printed on a mirror. And the image is all printed except for one area that you can see in the middle. And that area, there I am, is the mirror that reflects whoever's looking at it. So that was a commentary on male nudity in art, which is scarce, especially as portrayed by women. And particularly male genitals are not portrayed very often. And so I started focusing a lot on penises, which you'll see later. But also on images of naked bodies. And I was so interested in images of naked bodies that I started taking pictures of couples. And so I created this work, which is, it's interesting actually. I put it in the window and you can see it with a house behind it. It's a little bit hard to see the bodies though. So each one of these panes here is a couple that I photographed naked, front and back. And I'm going to show you without the background. Here, maybe you can see this better. So it's a front and a back of a couple, which I printed on glass. So you can see their bodies through each other. And they kind of melt, they kind of merge and melt into each other. And it's hard to tell whose body is whose. And it just creates really, really interesting and I think intriguing effects. And it also talks about bodies in art, because I tried to photograph as many couples with as many, old, young, white, black, straight, gay, whatever kinds of bodies, and all being equally interesting. Oh, and lots of tattoos, of course. Equally interesting and equally beautiful. And ultimately, I ended up making this thing that's a little bit like a quilt. So my work keeps coming back, even without me noticing it necessarily, to these patterns and, putting things together in patterns and matrices and stuff like that. And that really started to happen a lot when I got into printing. So after I printed on the glass and on the mirrors, I decided that I wanted to transform the photographs even more. And so I started working in different types of prints. First, I started with Intelio Printing. It's a little hard to see because of the shadow. And Intelio Printing is where you make a plate and you put ink on the plate and then you roll heavy rollers over the paper and the plate so that the ink gets imprinted into the paper. And that's really tedious and time consuming, and I don't like it. So even though I love the prints, it's a really long and hard process. And so I moved to screen printing with Gerard. Yay, Gerard. And of course, the first person I thought of was Andy Warhol. As you can probably tell, these are Andy Warhol inspired, but again, all with images of Nati. So what I was doing was I was taking images of Nati, that's my husband, and looking at different ways to show them, transform them, play with them. And so screen printing was a really, really successful way for me to play with my photographs. And I started playing first with the Andy Warhol type prints. Then I moved on to more colorful and I thought interesting types of prints where you put different colors on the screen and then you push it through and it creates all of these interesting and it's not all exactly planned, so you get a little bit more of a random feeling to it. And then I started printing on papers with patterns. And I really, really loved the papers with the patterns and how the patterns came through the prints. But I wasn't necessarily excited about the patterns themselves. Didn't have a lot of meaning as related to the image. So I decided to make my own patterns and print on my own patterns. And so I made different kinds of patterns. This is a pattern that I made. I don't know if you can see, but it's my hands making a heart shape. And I then turned it into a pattern, and then I printed on it and made a whole image. And then I made a pattern with my eyes and printed on that. And then my favorite, I think, is a pattern that I made where I combined several images of my hands making hearts, and my mouth. And I turned that into a pattern, and then I printed on that.
So Debbie, what inspired these patterns?
Oh my gosh. I didn't have any, yeah, I didn't have any particular inspiration. I think it's my interest in general, like with the quilts,
Right.
in color and pattern and repetition and
body parts.
And body parts.
Yeah.
Thank you. So yes, absolutely body parts. So the whole idea is, since I'm making art about my husband and he's my muse and my subject and my model, and I wanted to be a part of that too. So that's why it's my body parts as a background to the images that I make of him. So it's kind of a way of combining the two of us into these pieces, which I'm really excited about. And then I refined the eye pattern and made another one. And I wanted to show you the process, because this is an unfinished print where I have made the outer circle with the different colors, but I haven't made the actual image yet. And the actual image, when it's printed, is going to look like this. So you can see it's actually, there's 3 layers here. There's a layer which is just the white mask kind of thing that makes it a little bit more opaque, and I make an oval. In fact, I have one over here to show you. So first I make an oval on the paper, then I make the outer circle, which has the outline cut out, and then I make the actual image at the end, and I combine all of that into one print. And what I really want to do, and this is hopefully the next stage, but I don't know where or when I'm going to be able to do this, I want to make these patterns, and I want to make more patterns out of my body parts and make them into like a whole wallpaper, and just wallpaper a whole room with different parts of my body, and then put the prints of Nati, you know, on top of those. And so I'm also looking at different ways to frame them. I don't know if you can see, I was looking at some antique frames. So that would be like the wallpaper and the print on the wallpaper, and then I would frame it so that it actually looks like a picture, even though it's part of the wallpaper. And then I also looked at making my own frames, which I think is very interesting, using cake decorating materials.
Deb?
Yeah.
Question.
Yes.
This particular method looks very time consuming. like each piece looks like it takes a lot of time and effort and kind of tedium with the details.
That's an interesting question, because actually what I love about screen printing is that you can, once I make these patterns, so making these patterns, I guess you might consider it tedious, but I love it because it's just playing with images on the computer and playing with colors and playing with repetition and playing with, you know, how to make the shapes into something that's an interesting pattern. So I actually enjoy that. And then once you do that, it's actually not so hard, because you just print it a big paper, you know, with that pattern. And then there's 3 screens that you use for this particular piece, or for these types of pieces, there's 3 screens. So one screen is this screen, so you just print white, so that's very easy. Then the next screen, I'll show you another one, you print that colored stuff, so that all the colors are printed at the same time. So that's just a one time, you just pull it one time and you get all these beautiful colors and patterns. And then the third one is when you put the image over it. So that's the third bowl. So it's somewhat time consuming because you have to wait in between each one of those layers for it to dry. And Gerard knows how much I hate that. I hate having to wait for it to dry, but you have to wait. So you have to wait for the circle to dry. Then you can make this the outside circle, and then you have to wait for that to dry, and then you make that. So it's somewhat time consuming, but it's very rewarding because, you know, you get this really complicated interplay of the background and the foreground and the image and the pattern and all of those things. And that's what I really love.
Thank you.
Debbie,
Thank you.
knowing how you work, I can see that, you know, I mean, the background is really planned. You know, you planned that. But
Yes.
then when you are in the printing studio, you are very much free, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I like to experiment.
Okay.
And you're right. I'm free in the sense that I'm not planned. So when I do the circle areas that have all the different colors, what I love about it is that it's on top of this very planned background and this very kind of matrix of images is something that's completely unplanned. I mean, I plan the colors, I put the colors together that I like, but other than that, I let it happen. I drizzle all the different colors on the screen and then I push them through, and it's always, I love looking at what comes out because I have no idea what's going to come out. And I love that combination of expected and unexpected and sort of rigid pattern and flowy kind of colors. I also love screen printing because the colors are just so fun to play with. I mean, I just love playing with them. I'm just going to go through all the colors that I love so much.
So when you
go
were
ahead.
in the studio with your husband taking this picture, was it very planned, or were you very much like do whatever?
Oh, no, not do whatever, but also not plan. I mean, I have hundreds of pictures in all different poses, Gerard. So right now we're seeing this pose. This is one that I've used in a lot of prints. This is one that I used in some prints. And this is one that I'm using in print. So that's 3 that I chose because of their kind of graphic qualities and the way that they fit into the screen printing kind of concept that I have. But I have millions of them. I have pictures of him in every pose you could possibly imagine. And there's one last thing. This is what I'm working on now, actually, in addition to the screen prints. Because I was in the studio with my painter studio mate, and because I was taking a class with her on color and on painting, and I've never painted before. I wanted to do something with paint, but I can't paint. So I've always wanted to do something with nail polish because I think nail polish is gorgeous. I think the colors are gorgeous. And I think it's underappreciated as an artistic medium. And it's also feminine and, associated with, women and women's beauty and stuff. And I wanted to see how I could turn that into something that was part of a piece of art. And so I'm just showing you all of the beautiful colors because I just like playing with all the different colors. So I wanted to use my own fingers as the paintbrushes, since basically finger painting is the only kind of painting I can do. And I use my fingers to dab the nail polish onto the canvas. This is actually a wooden surface that I gessoed with white. And then I just dab it. I dab the nail polish on and make the image. So this project that I'm just starting now is going to be different body parts of Nati, enlarged and painted with my finger and with nail polish. And I'm going to show you how that's done. So this is the hand that I'm working on. So what I do is I use a projection, one of these projecting things, and I put a photograph on it and I project it onto the surface like that. And then I use the pixels, I use the density of the pixels to determine, where I'm going to dab more and where I'm going to dab less, so that I can get an image that looks like the hand, like that. And then I'm also working on this one, which you can see is a penis, because that's also part of my work. So that's what I'm working on now. So that I'm very excited about integrating the paint aspect and also the, painting with my fingers. I'm really, really loving that.
Did you create a legend for the colors, or are you going by how you feel?
So far I'm going by how I feel.
Okay.
And I'm trying to incorporate what I've learned about color. And we talked a lot in my class with Laura about warm colors and cold colors and, what colors do when they're next to each other. So I'm trying different things that have to do with that.
And how do you envision this series to be hung? I mean,
Yeah, so my vision. So what I really, really want to do is take these patterns, make more of them, of my body, wallpaper a whole room, and then have some of the prints on there, and have like a whole series like of the body parts on there. So it'll be a room with my body as wallpaper and Nati's body as, different types of images. And that's kind of my overarching vision right now for what I'd love to do if somebody wanted to give me a space. And
Debbie,
yeah,
Debbie, you have a space right here.
where, in my studio?
No, in my bedroom.
Oh, look at that.
I have to say that that's my mother. So my mother is volunteering her bedroom.
We love your mother for that.
Thank you, Mom.
Hey, Debbie, the thing
Yes.
with nail polish, Carol Sturtenbrod loves working with nail polish too.
Really? What has she done with it?
Well, she would when I was taking what's it called, ceramic tiles, she would have us break up eggshells and paint the eggs with nail polish. And then she'd have us break it and then make mosaics.
That is so cool. I love that so much. And that's really awesome. That reminds me of when you said broken eggshells, that actually reminds me that part of what I'm looking at is the artificial nails, or the nails that women glue onto their nails. And so I'm actually looking at those as, I want to incorporate them either as part of the frame or,
That would be awesome.
I don't know, something like that. Yeah, that's something that I'm looking at. And the last thing that I wanted to say before I sit down is once I moved into this studio, which was in September, I put all this stuff up and I realized something that I hadn't even realized while I was working, which is that starting with my quilts and but continuing on to my screen prints and paintings, that everything came around in terms of both bodies and patterns and colors and kind of like a combination of what some people would consider, and I don't like these terms, but it's what some people would consider high and low, you know, like wallpaper and quilts and things like that versus, you know, high art, you know, like Andy Warhol prints or whatever. So then I found a school of art that I didn't know about called Patterns and Decorations, which was a mostly feminist school of art in the 1970s and early 80s. And I discovered that they were doing so much stuff that is really kind of a precursor to what I'm doing. And so they became a really big inspiration for me. And one of the founders of the school and one of my favorite artists now is Miriam Shapiro, who did a lot of work with combining a lot of feminine stuff or whatever stereotypically feminine stuff like sewing and fabric and patterns and quilts and making huge pieces of art with that. So she made a really famous series called Anatomy of the Kimono. And it was like on these huge panels that covered like a whole room, which is of course what I want to do too. And so I've been looking a lot at that. I just kind of wanted to show you what's been inspiring me lately.
I actually didn't know about that movement at all.
Oh yeah, you should totally look it up. It's really interesting.
I'm going to.
Okay, I'm going to turn the camera back on me.
Okay, great, because we're going to ask you questions.
Great.
Well, one question that came up is about why is it important to combine your body parts with your husband's? Is that important for you?
It's fun and interesting for me. So it's important for me to do it because I feel like he has given me so much and my art so much in agreeing to be my model. And, you know, a lot of men don't want to show their body, which is, I think, one of the reasons why you don't see a lot of male nudes. It's not just that female artists or particularly photographers don't want to take pictures of men, but maybe the men aren't so comfortable, particularly after a certain age. I think young men in art school don't really mind taking their clothes off so much. But I think after that, especially at my age, when you hit middle age, not so much. So having him be such a big part of my art made me feel like I wanted to be in there with him too. And in the couples project that I was showing you, we actually did one where it was, he took pictures of me naked and I took pictures of him naked because I wanted to also experience that and not just be on the artist side of the I guess camera or whatever you'd consider it.
Do you think there's a conversation about gender?
I think there's, in my mind, it's mostly a conversation about gender roles.
Mm-hmm.
So in my life, I haven't had issues with gender so much as gender roles. And it's really, in fact, that I would say is one of the fundamental issues and questions in all of my art, everything from the beginning. What's women's art? What does that mean? What does it mean to be a woman artist? I hate that whole category of woman artists. I just want to be an artist, and I know most women feel, a lot of women feel that way. I don't want to be in shows that are for women. I don't want to be talked about as a woman artist. I just want to be an artist. And another fantasy that I have is actually to curate a show with women, 3 women who each get their own solo show, and then get a bunch of men and put one piece from each one of the men and say, this is the men's art, but the other is just the art. So that is how I see it. It's like, it's all art. And just because women are interested in whatever they're interested in doesn't mean it's any less just art than whatever men are interested in. Men are interested in naked women's bodies, and that's high art. There's tons of it in all museums and in all collections, and every male artist has done, well, gay men like to do their male partners, but straight women don't tend to do their male partners at all. So that's an imbalance that I have in mind all the time, as well as the imbalance in artist versus woman artist.
Right, right. No, I get it. All right. So let's go back to the quilt, the first piece. Did you ever quilt it?
No, I hate quilting. Thank you for asking that. I absolutely hate quilting. I hate sewing. I'm terrible at it. My sister Becky, who's I think here, she's a really, really good sewer and makes amazing, amazing, very detailed and very meticulous pieces that I love and that I admire and that I envy, because I can't do that at all. And so part of what I enjoy about using photographic tools is that I know how to use them and how to manipulate images with them. And I can do something that's like quilting without actually having to use a sewing machine. I can't use a sewing machine. I'm terrible at it.
But you're right about like this, that all your work, there's a quilt element to your work, you know.
I think there is. I think there is.
I agree. And I wonder, where did that come from? Did you see a quilt one day and you go like, voila?
Not at all.
Okay.
You know what it is? And I think I just realized this after I put everything together and realized that everything is coming back to this whole combination of patterns and colors. I think this is how my mind works, is it just, I don't think in individual images. I always think about images as part of a larger whole, a larger piece. So for me, a piece is never one thing. It's almost always several things that when you put them together, they hopefully create a whole that's bigger than the sum of the parts.
That's a beautiful image right there. It's like your mind is a quilt.
Yeah.
I love that.
I think that's my mind, yeah.
Very nice.
Can we talk about censorship?
Sure.
Have you experienced this?
Very interesting question, Gerard, because when I had my show at Fleisher, and all I put up was the quilts and those pictures of my husband and I only put up 2 of the couples on the glass. And there was a sign that was put up by Fleisher, and it said, warning to parents or something like that, there's nudity in this show, for my show. But I know that in the student show and in the teacher show and sometimes in the Wind Challenge shows, people put nude pictures of women all the time. And there's no sign that says there's nudity, beware, don't let your kids see this. But because there were penises, I think it was an issue. It was taken down. And I was glad and grateful that it was taken down, but I think it was a little startling for some people. That wasn't censorship, it was just an interesting commentary. Then I participated, actually a gallery in New York called Klompching Gallery that everybody should check out. It's a really great photography gallery in Dumbo. They have a summer open call every year, and so I was chosen to be not in the gallery, but in their catalog. And I sent a few of the images for the catalog. And my favorite image, I'm going to show it to you, actually. I'm going to go back here. So my favorite image, and a lot of people's favorite image from this series, is this one. I really like the colors, and I really like the reflection of Nati in the mirror and everything. But as you can see, oh no, look at that. There's a few penises actually, because the mirrors break it up and reflect it several times. And so I sent this one, which is my favorite, and I sent this one, which I also love, but which is, you know, less, you don't see, there's no frontal male nudity. And they chose to show this one in the catalog and not this one. And when I talked to the gallery owners about it, about how they chose, they said, oh, well, there was just that one little, you know, part of that image that we, you know, felt like we didn't want to include in the catalog. So I thought that was really funny because that was exactly the whole point of the project.
Right.
So that was really interesting. When there was a review of my show at Fleisher, actually, which was very interesting, the guy who reviewed it said it was pornographic.
Wow.
Yeah, that there were pornographic images, which I thought was super interesting because, that obviously, I didn't think of it as pornographic. I don't think pictures of nude women are considered pornographic when they're done as, fine art. And when I actually texted him because that's the subject that I'm interested in, I said, well, what did you think? What made you think that it was pornographic? And he said, oh, no, I just, that was just a word I used to describe it. I don't know. He didn't really have a good explanation for it. So I've never been censored exactly, but things have been excluded or defined in ways that I think are, based on the prejudice that people have against this kind of art.
Would you continue doing this kind of art?
Of course.
Okay.
As you can see from my fingerprint images, I'm going to continue and look for other ways to do it that feel good to me in terms of my process and how I participate in making the images, and also in terms of the statement that I'm trying to make. So it's always, for me, I'm very preachy, and I have these battles that I'm fighting and crusades that I'm on. And so it's always a balance for me. Like, it's always a struggle to get away from just preaching and get into the image making. And so that's what I struggle with.
Okay, before we move on to another question, someone did have a question about, were you inspired by Cubism?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I was definitely inspired by Cubism. That's a really great question. When I was making the mirror images, I was thinking about how do you make photography that's cubist? And so even before I started taking pictures of Nati, I was experimenting with those mirrors to see how I could break up the surface and do that cubist thing where, it's all kind of flat and you're kind of flattening things out in weird ways with different shapes and stuff. And then I didn't have a good subject. So I had the idea of the cubist photograph long before I had the subject. And I think it was a few years after I had thought about it that the subject came along, which was Nati.
And he was your first?
Yeah.
Model, I meant.
My first model. Well, he wasn't even my first model, Gerard.
Okay, he wasn't.
No.
Tell me.
My first model, he didn't want to.
Oh,
really? I said, Nati, there are no pictures of male, women photographers don't photograph their partners nude. I need to take pictures of you. And he said, no. And I said, okay, well, then I'll just hire a male model, And so I hired a male model and started making pictures with him, and it was fabulous. And he was this young gay guy who was really comfortable being a model, and obviously there was nothing going on between us. But Nati saw me one day in the studio or at my computer looking at some big images that I had made of this guy, and he was not happy with me looking at this guy's body. It didn't matter, that he was young and that he was gay and that we had nothing going on. And he said, okay, fine. But no face, just body. So we started doing his body, and we did a lot of those broken mirror images with his body, and they came out great. But I said, I need head. I shouldn't say that. That sounds very sexual. I need your head to be part of it. This is turning into a pornographic studio tour.
we better shift this.
So I said, I have to have your face in it. We can't do it. And he, in the meantime, had been doing a lot of research about nudity in art. And we did a huge survey where we collected pictures on the internet of female nudes made by males and female nudes made by females and male nudes made by men and male nudes made by women. And really, it was a really striking contrast, a number huge number of women made by both men and women, and tiny, 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 tiny number of men made by women. And it was sort of a way of just validating what I had found, or what I thought I had found, in terms of that disparity. And Nati is so amazing, and he's such a feminist, and he was so angry at that disparity, that was another motivating factor for him to want to participate and to agree to participate fully with his whole body and his face. And the final reason that he gave, which I think is really amazing and just reflects on how great he is that he was an oncologist, and he said, my patients, I said, when I did these pictures, I said, you have to be okay with your colleagues seeing them, with your patients seeing them, with your family seeing them, with your friends seeing them, with the world seeing them. Think about all those different categories, whether you really want all these people to see your naked body. And he said, my patients have to take off their clothes and expose themselves in ways that are so much more humiliating and vulnerable. And the least I can do is expose myself in such a wonderful, kind of loving way.
Wow.
So of course I'm going to do it. And so I thought that was just amazing.
That's really beautiful.
Yeah, that is.
That really is lovely about Nati. That's terrific.
Yeah.
That is love. No, but aside from that, I mean, when you were comparing like different artists and their approaches towards nudity, obviously the female body being more, I don't know how to call it, approachable, I guess.
Prevalent.
Right, prevalent.
And many people say, and many people claim, and you wouldn't, I mean, I find it hard to believe, but you'll probably, people might be thinking this right now, that the female body is more beautiful. So when I tell people about what I'm doing, they say, well, of course people do women more because women's bodies are more beautiful. And I just say, what? That is so clearly to me an internalized social norm, as opposed to an aesthetic judgment.
Right, right.
That's how it feels to me. Some people say, oh no, male bodies, oh, male genitals, oh, penises, they're so weird, they're so funny. Yeah, they're funny, they're weird, but the male body is just as beautiful as the female body. I think that's
it's sort of like the words that you wouldn't call a man pretty, you would say handsome. But why? There's
right.
no reason why.
There's no reason why. And that's the whole, we get back to the gender roles and descriptions. Absolutely.
Wow, it's amazing. All right, questions. Let's go back to your resume. That's what I wanted to do. So you're a photographer and you're a mixed media artist, but before that, you actually graduated with a degree from Harvard in English. Yeah. How is that degree helped you or not helped you at all in your art career?
That's really interesting. Really interesting question, Gerard. Nobody ever asked me that. I think because of I studied English literature and was very interested in feminism and feminist critiques. And I think the theoretical background that I actually got in literature has carried over. And it's really interesting if you think about the school that I now identify with, which is what I showed you, the Patterns and Decorations movement, is the feminists from the 70s, which is pretty much who I was studying when I was in college in the 80s, and who I was identifying with. And it all comes all together.
Wow.
It all comes all together. Yeah. Yeah. So that really, I mean, that theoretical background, I think in literature is very similar to literary critique and artistic critique. They all overlap.
Wow. Yes, they do. And any favorite artists from then or now?
Oh my gosh. Well, aside from the newly discovered Miriam Shapiro and that whole school, I have 3 artists, and they're all men, because doesn't matter to me. It's the art that I care about. And so the three artists who are not even necessarily favorite in terms of I love their art more than other art, because I love so many different artists, but it's because I find their art, their art is the most iconic for their time, and I think defined a lot of the art of their time and also reflected a lot of the culture of their time. And so those three are the giants, Picasso, and Andy Warhol, and Jeff Koons. Now, whenever I say Jeff Koons, everybody just starts screaming.
Right.
Because, and that's okay. I think that his art is incredible in terms of both defining and reflecting the time. It's materialistic. It's kind of bombastic. It's shiny. I think it's beautiful and funny and interesting and smart. You know, a lot of people think that he's, you know, just very commercial and has become way too much of a, you know, kind of pop icon, making lots of money and having like all his minions do his work for him. But so did a lot of other great artists, and I would love to have minions doing my work for me. I love conceptualizing my pieces. I don't always love making them. You know, I would love it if I could tell people to make some stuff like huge quilts that take a really long time and just that they could do all the busy work. So I don't hold that against him. Sorry guys, anybody who hates Jeff Koons, I apologize for, you know, that's who I think of as the iconic artists of their time. Now, in terms of like who I identify with, it's interesting because Louise Bourgeois is one of my favorite artists, and she has a lot of, she actually did some penises, which is interesting, but also some really large spiders and a lot of more conceptual stuff, and she's really just amazing. As far as photographers, I really love Sally Mann. And Sally Mann is one of the few photographers who's actually taken pictures of her naked husband. In fact, she wrote a whole thing about how she hasn't found any other female photographers who are doing that. But she took pictures of him when he was sick and of his kind of sick body, not necessarily of his beautiful, sexy body. And I love her pictures of her kids, and I don't think they're pornographic or anything like that. So I identify with her also.
Next question will be about how did you get into photography then?
Yeah.
It just happened. It was organic.
I always took pictures, but I never thought of myself as an artist, and I'm still struggling with that whole self-definition as an artist. I mean, now that I have the studio and now that I've been working as a full-time artist for a few years, I'm getting more comfortable. But I always took pictures, but writing was always my way of making a living, because I was an English major, as you said. And I had wanted to write fiction, but obviously I couldn't generate any income with that. So I wrote marketing copy and PR copy and ad copy and stuff like that. And I was always taking pictures, but not thinking about it as art. And then I started doing some projects on the side when I had time. You know, I had kids too, so I didn't really have a lot of time. So I consider myself very lucky for not having gone to art school and having spent, 20, 25 years of my life not doing art and writing and generating income, now to have the leisure, because my husband is able to basically let me do what I want. And not have to generate income, so I can actually do this. Otherwise, I would not be able to do this, and so I'm really grateful also for that. And he says at least one of us should, be having fun.
That's awesome. All right, we have a few more minutes, so if anyone has any questions, please, this is the time. Let's see, I was going to ask you something else too about your last show. Yes. That's where you show the couples, is that right?
Oh yeah, Vita, do we have time to show the slides of the sculpture?
Yes, I will do that right now.
So yes, my last show was at Vox Populi, which is a fantastic artists collective in Philadelphia. and they have an open call every summer. And so one of the pieces that was in the show is this piece, and this is actually a quilt that I made based on an Amish pattern. It's called Sunshine and Shadow, but it has lots of little images from Cosmopolitan magazine interspersed in it. And I made the quilt, and I printed it on fabric, and then I molded the fabric around the figure of my daughter, kind of lying curled up in that pose. I actually made a cast of her body, and then I molded the fabric around the cast. And then I presented it both in the Fleisher show and in the Vox show on a glass table with a mirror underneath. Yeah, there, you can see it there. Those are some of the quilts in the background, and then that it has a mirror underneath, so you can see that the figure is actually hollow. And it's called How I Felt as a Teenager Reading Cosmopolitan magazine. So it's about, again, it's about gender roles and body image and bodies, and sort of combining all of those things with a quilt, as always.
Wow.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Okay. Here we are. We're back. Well, you've been getting a lot of people love your work. I mean,
Thank you.
I haven't been telling you, but they have been saying that all along. So you should feel really good about this. How can they find you? Your website, what's your website?
DebbieLermanPhotos.com. It's
Okay.
very easy. Or you can just Google Debbie Lerman and you'll find it. I really appreciate the feedback. Thank you so much. I'm so grateful for this opportunity. It's been so much fun.
Well,
And I do really, really hope that some people will stop by in person. In October, we have open studio tours in Philadelphia, where all of the different areas of the city, all the artists in the different areas open up their studios and people can come and visit. So I encourage everybody to look for that. It's called Post, P-O-S-T. And it's going to be in October, and I'll definitely be participating in that. Hopefully, we'll be able to do it in person.
that's awesome. Thank you so much, Debbie, for being here with us tonight.
Thank you.
And thank you to everyone for being here as well. Again, if you want to support Fleisher, this is the time to do so. We need all the help we can get. So you got the information. Also, if you have any questions, you can reach out to Vida, and she'll direct you the right way. And thank you again. Everyone have a wonderful night.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye-bye.